So we are going to start talking about hand position and finger technique. So what we want to do to begin with is you're going to take your left thumb here and it's going to rest right here on this little thumb rest here. You want to make sure that it's nice and relaxed and curved, and then to get to this register key right here, you want to be able to be close enough that you can just roll your thumb over. You don't want to have to move it like this because that takes up lots of extra time when you're playing and it can make you come in late and it's just not comfortable to play that way. Next, we're going to talk about the right hand. So down here, there's a little thumb rest for your right hand, and it should not anchor the instrument. So when you have your right thumb here, you want about where your nail is, that's about where you want your thumb to be. That way you can still reach the pearls over here, you can reach the palm keys, the side keys, all those things. But yes, you want to make sure that the neck strap is what holds your instrument, not your right thumb. Let's see, next we're going to talk about how to hold your instrument. So the hand position when you're holding your instrument would be to hold down here at the bell, and then, or at the bottom I mean, and then your other hand would go here on the bell. This way you don't bump any of the rods, any of the keys, any buttons, that way nothing gets bent. It's just the safest way to handle your instrument. Our next chapter we're going to go over is embouchure. So the way that you want to have a good saxophone embouchure, first of all, it varies depending on how your mouth is built, where your muscles are, those kinds of things. It can change for every person, but in general, what you want to do is you'll have your lower lip is going to curl just over your teeth, like this, and then your top teeth are going to rest gently on the mouthpiece. You don't want to bite, you don't want to move your jaw, you just want them to sit there and rest nicely. So I'll kind of show you what that looks like, and then I'll set my lip down so you can see how it would normally look. So that's kind of what you want your basic embouchure to look like. It should be very steady, very controlled. You don't want it to be tense. It's okay if it's firm, but you don't want to have tension to where it's hard to where you can't relax while you're playing. A good way to tell how much mouthpiece you need to have in your mouth. So if you look at your saxophone here, there's a spot where the reed eventually is no longer touching the mouthpiece. So it's about here on my instrument. So that's about how much mouthpiece, I would put in my mouth. You can also tell if you take a piece of paper and slide it in there, the paper will only go in as far as the reed separates. So once the reed and the mouthpiece starts to touch again, that's how you know that's where your mouth should be. Next, we're going to talk about breathing. It's very similar to like bowing on a string instrument, but this is like the saxophone version. So when you're breathing, if you have your embouchure set, you don't want to go like this or anything like that. You want to leave your teeth on the top of the mouthpiece, and you want to leave your lip curled just like it was, and then you're going to let the air come in through the corners of your mouth, so just like this. That way, everything is nice and steady, it's firm, it helps you to stay more relaxed, and then you don't have to take all the time to set your embouchure again because you're just ready to go. It's also important when you're breathing to think about breathing right here through your abdominal muscles. So when you breathe, your shoulders and your head shouldn't move really. So what you want to avoid is this. Yes, because when you play like that, it cuts off your air, it makes you much more restricted and more tense. But when you breathe from down here, it helps you can get more air and you can play longer, and also it's a lot more comfortable. And then depending on the pressure of air you need, that's kind of based on the kind of sound you're going for. So if you're playing a bigger saxophone, for example, like a tenor, you would need to have less pressure, but you would still need more air. So that's something you can kind of play with on your own to help you figure out on your specific instrument how much air you need to do different kinds of different styles of playing. So a good note to practice on would be a B natural, which is just your thumb on the thumb rest, and then your first finger on your left hand right here. It's going to be on the pearl right here. So I'll show you what it looks like to take. First of all, I'll demonstrate again what it can sound like and look like if you don't take a good breath, and then I'll do a good breath for you to show what it looks like and sounds like. Oops, here we go. That's the thing that we don't want to do. So that was a little exaggerated, but we don't want our shoulders to move. We want them to be nice and steady and straight and still. So here's what it looks like to to take a good breath. Okay, and then depending on, we'll talk about this more in a different chapter, but depending on the kind of sound you want, like I said, you would need more air, less air. Each saxophone's a little bit different on that, but we'll talk more about that later as well. So moving on to our next chapter, we're going to talk about the factors that influence basic tone, about factors of tone quality. So it's different with each saxophone, like I had previously mentioned. Every saxophone's made just a tiny bit different, and so what you need to do as a saxophone player is you'll go and it helps to listen to professional recordings, but you'll just go through and listen to other professional musicians. You can search them on YouTube, just professional saxophone players, and they can help you kind of get an idea of what a good saxophone sound is. There's not one sound that's right and one that's wrong. It just depends on the style you're playing, the sounds coming from other instruments in the ensemble. So you can look at marching band saxophone music, the saxophone part in marching band music, excuse me. And then you can also look at saxophones in concert band, saxophones in jazz band. There's all kinds of different styles with saxophone. It's very unique and versatile, and so it's good to listen to lots of different kinds of professional saxophone recordings. In general, though, when you play louder, it's going to be more flat. So when you start to practice tuning, that's the thing to consider, is that oftentimes with louder dynamics, you'll have to make accommodations with your instrument so that it doesn't sound flat. Also, another thing that can influence your tone quality is your reed. Because if your reed is too hard or too soft, it'll cause you to have to do unnatural adjustments here with your mouth, and so that creates bad alignment with your body, because you can kind of go sideways a little bit or lean forward too much or have to rest your saxophone on your knees or something like that we don't want to do. And so it's always good to make sure you have a good reed that's not too hard or too soft. It'll just be a lot more comfortable to play once you find a strong reed that's not too hard, though. But you also don't want it to be too soft, because the same problems can occur there. Yes, so our next chapter we're going to go over is air usage and breathing factors related to that. So in general, when you're playing in the lower register on the saxophone, you're going to need more air. So it just means you want to take a bigger breath here from your abdomen area. It's really important that you breathe, like I talked about earlier, from the corners of your mouth, because otherwise your oral cavity and the mouthpiece area gets very restricted, and then your breathing gets restricted, and also it's much louder. I'll demonstrate this for you. So if you don't breathe from the corners of your mouth, for example, it will be much louder, it'll be more distracting, and it can make it hard to get a good start on the piece you're playing. So here's what you don't want to do. But a better way to do it, it'll be more subtle, it'll be more calm, it won't be quite as much movement that can throw you off, is like you'll just keep your mouthpiece in your mouth in your embouchure set, and you'll just breathe right here through the corners of your mouth, like this. Okay, so that's a really important thing we want to always focus on. Also, a good thing to practice on, especially when you have a little bit of free time and you want to just have some fun with the saxophone, is you want to work on exploring how much air you need for your personal saxophone and your personal setup in order to get different kinds of sounds. So this can be a really fun thing to practice. I'll demonstrate for you a little bit just how sound can change. Like I said, there's not one right or one wrong sound. It's just dependent upon what sound you're going for, if you're in band, how that fits into the rest of the ensemble. If you're doing a solo, how it fits in with the piano part. It really does depend on kind of what you're going for. So it's good to practice on different notes here. So I'll show you a little bit of what that can be like. On the last notes that I played, that would be an F. At first, you couldn't have seen this because it was behind, but I didn't have my octave key pressed, but it still came out as the higher note. And so that would be a thing for me personally that I could practice is working towards aiming for the lower note, so finding what fits comfortably with my armature so that I can get the lower octave F, because the upper octave F sometimes naturally comes out, and so it's good to practice and kind of know where your limits are, to kind of know what you need to do in order to achieve a certain kind of sound. Also, when I played the B, A, and the G up here towards the beginning of that, when I pushed harder and used more air, that created a different tone, a different tune. If I had played it quiet, like say I had played an A and then I had played the A much louder, the tuning there would have probably been very, very different. So if I had had my tuner out, and this is a great thing to practice too, is trying to get notes in tune at different dynamic levels. So you would just take your tuner and there's be the little needle on the screen and it'll kind of sway one way or the other, and your goal is to get it right down the middle, okay? So that's going to be what we talk about there. Next is articulation. So articulation just means adding space between the notes, to put it very simply. And the way you do that is we use our tongue. So we don't need our tongues to make a sound. We use our tongues to stop the sound. So sound stops when the reed up here stops vibrating. So it's really important to think about that you don't need your tongue to start a sound. Your tongue is used to stop sounds. So it is possible, this isn't something that we always think about, but it is very possible and actually kind of a common thing to start playing notes without your tongue. So I'll show you here, I'm going to play an A, and I will show you how it sounds to start a note without your tongue. Okay, and it can take a little getting used to. Some instruments use their tongues a little bit more to do that than saxophone does, so it kind of just depends on what you're comfortable with. It can take a little time to get used to that. But basically, it's important to know that you don't need to have your tongue to start a sound. Your tongue is used to stop sounds. So the way that we would stop sounds for saxophone, it can be different for everybody. Saxophone is a very comfortable instrument in the sense that you can, there are a few areas where it can be flexible about what you need to do to make a good sound, and it can be comfortable for you, and the next person might do it a little differently, but that doesn't mean that they're wrong. It just means that their setup is a little bit different, and so it's good to have that flexibility. So next, we'll talk about the different ways that you can articulate. So some people, if this is comfortable for you, you can tongue with the very tip of your tongue. So it'd be like right about here. And what you would do is you would tap the tip of your tongue to the tip of the reed. I'll show you what that kind of looks like. As a clarinet player, that's usually pretty comfortable for me to do that because we do that with a clarinet sometimes. But basically what that would sound like, I'm going to play it on a G. I'll use the tip of my tongue to the tip of the reed. Just like that, okay? And if that seems like your tongue is like pushed too far in your mouth or it doesn't feel comfortable for any reason, that's okay. Another option you have is to tongue with the middle of your tongue. And so what that would mean is you would tongue kind of right back in there, in that area, not all the way in the back. And so then that would be the spot that hits the tip of your reed. You always want to touch the tip of the reed, and you want to be gentle as you do it because the reed can break, and so it's important. You can still use strength if you're trying to go for a staccato or a sharper note in that sense, but it's always important to be mindful of not breaking our reeds. So to tongue in the middle, this is also pretty comfortable for me, and so I'll show you kind of what that looks like, or what it sounds like rather. I'll play a G once again. This is tonguing in the middle. This is using the middle of my tongue to the tip of the reed. Okay. Next, the final option is if that doesn't seem quite right for you, another thing you can try is called anchor tonguing. That's when the back of your tongue is going to be still, and then you're going to use that to tongue. So your tongue is a little bit, it anchors is what that's called, is anchoring into your mouth, and then you would use more of the back of your tongue to touch the reed, and then your tongue would lay underneath the reed a little bit more. So I'm not going to demonstrate for you, but I'll show you kind of what that would look like. So here's, I got my mouthpiece right here, and then my tongue is going to be kind of farther in like this. So that's about where I would tongue. Yes, so those are the 6 chapters we're going to go over today. yes, that is the end of our lesson. Thank you.